That's one of the things I love about math and science in general is you can look at a really complex problem and say, okay, well, this problem's too complicated to solve. How can I break it down into a series of smaller problems that I do know how to solve?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Gretchen Rowe, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you all to the Demi Learning Show. I am so delighted to sit down and have this conversation today with a young man that I call my spare son. Jack Carty and my son Duncan have been friends since they were wee ones, little boys of 5 and 6, about this big, and now they're grown adults. And if you joined us several weeks ago for our second Career Connections conversation, I spoke with Duncan, and I've been looking forward to this conversation with Jack today because I've been fascinated with how Jack thinks, how he learns, and what he has accomplished in his career thus far. So let's begin. And Jack, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Jack Carty. I'm a mechanical engineer. I love to learn, and like Gretchen said, she's been almost my second mom. So, I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, his mom and I used to joke back and forth that we would claim Jack on our taxes on the odd years, and they would claim Duncan on their taxes on the even years. And their friendship has been precious and sweet, and it's been fun to watch them grow to adulthood. Today, we want to talk about Jack's love of learning and his interest in how things work ever since I can possibly remember. So, Jack, I know that you chose a career path based on your interests. So tell us all the way back at the beginning when you knew that you were looking to do something oriented in college towards how things work.
When I was little, I was always bothering my parents saying, like, how does this work? Why? What's going on with this? One of the stories I remember, my mom was trying to get me to be on time for school, and I was very infatuated with a puddle of water that had a little like oil on it. So there was rainbowy reflections. So I'm like, Mom, look, there's a rainbow. Why is there a rainbow? And my mom was not having it. She was like, we're late, get in the car. The rainbow is there because it's there. Don't worry about it. Figure it out later. And I always remember just sort of nothing against her. We were late, you know. And I love that. But I just wanted to figure out why things work. And I've always just been sort of curious. So for college, in high school, I was taking all the science classes, the required classes. Took chemistry. I thought I really liked chemistry. And then when I was in 11th grade, I took a physics class. And I was like, hmm, kind of like there's more than chemistry. But I took some like high school engineering classes, and I always thought those were interesting as well. But then in college, when I had to pick my major, I took the intro engineering class, and I was like, this is not as intriguing as the intro physics classes. So I picked physics, figuring it was be easier to go from physics to engineering than engineering to physics. I don't know why I decided that, but that was what I decided. And I got my degree in physics, and I wound up as a mechanical engineer anyhow.
And you and I both have in common that we're graduates of UMBC in Baltimore. I love the fact that your college pursuits didn't take you too terribly far from home, but you and I also share the privilege of being able to work from home most of the time. So tell me, Jack, what did you find so intriguing about physics that made it more fascinating than chemistry?
So with physics at like the entry level, it tells you more immediately about what's going on with the world. Once you get a little bit better of a grasp on chemistry, you can look at the chemical compositions of things and say, oh, that's what's going on. That's why tape acts the way it does. That's why super glue does that. But that takes a lot more comprehension and a lot further getting into the subject than just looking at, oh, this is the equation for the motion of a football. I throw the football and it's going to go in a ballistic arch. So it's just immediate, like, this is how the world works. This is using math to understand what's going on around me.
Have you always been a good math student? Did you take a lot I don't even know the answer to this question. Did you take a lot of math courses in high school?
I actually was a little bit like I was good at math, but I was always sort of afraid of calculus in high school because I wasn't particularly what you would call a good student. Like I loved to learn, but all of the kids in my class were like, AP Calc is so hard. And I was like, that's scary. And I let myself get really intimidated by it. And I never took calculus. I took every other math class in my school but calculus. And then I went to college and I took a calculus class and I wound up absolutely loving the subject. So
I think I remember Duncan saying the same thing. He didn't anticipate enjoying it as much as he did, but he found the puzzle-like quality of it to be very, intriguing and to be able to figure out how to solve something, almost like in a, what was how was it he described it? To sort the I don't wanna say factors because that's a math term, but to be able to sort the elements until you figured out what the clear path was forward to an answer. I think
yeah,
that's fascinating.
that's one of the things I love about math and science in general is you can look at a really complex problem and say, okay, well, this problem's too complicated to solve. How can I break it down into a series of smaller problems that I do know how to solve?
That's interesting, Jack. So, when you chose to go major in physics in college, was there a particular professor that you found to be a mentor or someone that you felt really helped guide you to the path you're on now?
There were two professors that I was decently close with. The main professor I had, his name was Dr. Warcheski. I had him for, I'm going to say, like 5 classes. And um, he took, he taught a class that was really the weed out class for the physics majors. It was waves and vibrations. And it was where the engineering majors no longer had to take the class. It's like, okay, so this class is just applied differential equations. It's like here's the classical wave formula, figure stuff out. And I really liked his classes, and I actually wound up taking some like higher level studies with him. And then the other teacher that I really liked was a computational physics professor named Dr. Roshalema, who I wound up working under for a year before I got a call to go back to my that they needed me again in my engineering internship.
So, tell me a little bit about what did you say that class was? Computational physics?
Yeah.
Okay, so how is that different from general physics for someone who only understands physics in, Newton's laws of motion? So
It's been a while, and there's specific math words that I'm not 100% certain on, so I'm not going to say with certainty, but there's some math problems that we've like definitively solved. Oh, it's analytical. We have analytical solutions to these math problems. And we're like, okay, the math is complicated, but we can solve it and get an equation that's right. Some things are a little more complicated than that. So instead of solving an analytical solution, we know that if we just make the computer do a lot of math and a lot of numbers, we can get something that approaches the analytical solution, which is forget the name of the movie, but there's a movie about the women that were doing the computations for NASA for going to the moon. Uh,
hidden figures?
Hidden Figures, yeah. So they were doing computational math by hand, and it's a really good movie. But that is just doing the same thing they were doing, but instead of having to have a whole room full of people, you just write some code to do it.
Well, how much of code writing was involved in your getting your degree? I didn't really think about that, but there probably was more than I would anticipate.
So for a physics degree, in my experience, writing code tends to fall more on the laboratory side. Like you have the analytical, like pure theory, and then you have the experimental side. And you'd have to take lab classes, and when you take a lab class you take data, and then you have to take that data and you have to plot it, and you have to say how close is it to my actual value, like to my expected value. Does the data mean anything? And that's where, you know, it wasn't the most advanced coding. It was just some basic Python, but it was a skill that I wound up learning of, like, how do I take this data and what does it mean?
Did you have to take a class to learn Python, or was it kind
That
of learn
that was
as you go
that was a
course?
sort of the computational class, but there was a good bit of learn as you go. Some of my professors were like, "Hey, I had to learn this over the winter break. Here's the resources that I used to learn it. Figure it out." So
So you had to have a degree then of, individual initiative to be able to get where you wanted to be, and I know you were doing this in the middle of COVID to boot, so you were a little bit on your own in that process, were you not?
yes and no. Like, the professors were good that, if you asked them questions, they would do their best to help you. But, like, it one of the things I've learned about school is school really isn't about teaching you something as much as it's about teaching you how to think and approach problems the way that you're supposed to approach them in a career. So that was one of the things that I really felt like I gained from my program. Like, hey, here's a set of tools. Go figure out how to use those tools. Look it up. Read about it. Mess with it. Um, and that was just a general set of skills that I think have been very useful.
So Jack, how is college classes different from your high school experiences? Because in high school, somebody sort of meets out for you exactly the expectations and, the deadlines and all of those things, and you have a lot more latitude in college to sort of deliver on the promise of an expectation in a classroom. How did that change for you? Was that easier or harder?
A little bit of both. Honestly, I think the hardest part for me about college was learning time management, which is a skill that I'm still learning because in high school, you go, you start your day, you have 8 hours of just day. And then ideally, you do homework. You should do homework. It's kind of there for a reason. I learned that the hard way. And then, in college, you go to a class and then you might have like a 4 hour break. And then there's another hour-long class, stuff along those lines. You might have days, in some cases, where you don't have classes in the middle of the week, and you have to really build. It took a bit of learning to build that, like, just because I don't have class today doesn't mean I can't do nothing. I have to still figure stuff out. Like, my homework, some of my college homework might have only been 4 questions a week, but it still took me all week to work on it.
Knowing that you have that kind of latitude, particularly because you and I both have attention deficit disorder, that becomes even more complicated when we're trying to plan our time because sometimes we don't measure time in the same way that people without attention deficit disorder do.
Yeah. Um, the executive function of attention deficit disorder was really quite the hardest part. Like, I just you have to actually stay on top of getting your stuff done. Just because you can do with a homework assignment 2 hours before it's due doesn't mean you're going to absorb the information as well as if you spend 4 hours spread out over 4 days.
I think there's probably a lot of parents in the audience who are going to appreciate your saying that because, sometimes we wait till the last minute because there's always something more fun available to us. But being able to spread it out so we can absorb it, that's a huge difference. So tell me how now in your work life it's different than college. Is it more like high school in that there are expectations guiding you, or is there more latitude in that you get to determine your workflow and your deadlines?
Originally there was more latitude, but I don't really. I tend to struggle with that latitude. I really tend to struggle if I'm setting my own deadlines. So I actually worked with my supervisor and I said, "Hey, I know you like the work that I do, But for me, I need more firm deadlines. So even if there are arbitrary deadlines, like I'm not trying to ask you to micromanage me, but I need you to say, hey, I need this done by this date. If you just say, I need this done, I'll spend forever trying to make it whatever I think is perfect. And that's not good enough for industry. You need to give your, uh, you need to hand it off to someone. They'll give you feedback and comments and say, I want you to change this. It's not going to be perfect on the first try, but you got to get it as close as you can. And that's the thing that I think is really different because I know I tend to spend too much time trying to get something to be perfect. Uh, and that's a bit of the enemy of perfection.
That's interesting that you would say that, Jack. I would think as the youngest child, perfectionism wouldn't be part of your DNA, but if I'm understanding you correctly, it is in a work environment. So, how is that different?
I hold myself to a very high standard for the quality of work that I do, and that's good and bad. Part of one of the things I've learned is part of being on a team is doing like you have to accept your teammates are going to help you tell you what's good, and that kind of brings it back around to like the learning aspect of you have to learn about like what needs to get done, and you're never really done learning. And every time you go into a different industry or a different role, what's expected of you is going to change a little bit. And the only way to know if you're doing it right is to get feedback from others. That's something I'm still working on doing.
Well, it sounds like you, though, are very conscious of that, and so that makes a tremendous amount of difference. So, Jack, how much of the college degree that you obtained is actually applicable to what you're doing now in your work environment?
Almost not.
Almost none. Okay. How does that feel?
Um, Not the best. Currently, we're doing a project that's not my favorite, and I'm looking at new jobs. But another project that is coming down the pipeline is going to be more applicable to my college degree of testing and doing uh an analysis on like if I do this, what result will happen. And it's one of those things that's more computationally there's no analytical solution to this problem. So we have to go and we got a big I-beam in the warehouse and we're gonna clamp stuff onto it and bolt it on and measure the force. And I'm looking forward to that. But right now what I'm doing, it feels like it's a little bit of busy work to get the bills paid, and it's a part of life, and it's not fun. But
Well, that's probably one of the most painful lessons of adulthood is recognizing that there's a lot of things you'll do that aren't really fun, but they're necessary to get the job done. So, where do you see yourself down the road? Do you see yourself going further into the career of physics to stepping out of engineering and back toward physics? Or are you going to stay and will you stay a mech engineer or will you go a different direction still?
right now, I'm opening myself to changes. I've got a couple potential things that I want to do. I would like to go back into research at some point, but I'm trying to get my company to pay for a master's degree because I don't want to pay for it myself because they're expensive.
Sure.
So, um,
Would you get a master's in physics or would you get a master's in a related field?
probably material science or data analytics is what I'm looking at.
Okay. So I understand data analytics. That's taking data and doing analysis in a variety of different ways to look for patterns and um, reproducible results. But what's the former thing that you said?
So, material science is looking at the chemistry of things, not just the chemistry, but there's short answers. It's how different materials react to different stimuli. And if I have like this metal alloy is when I push on it this way, it's gonna bend that much. Or I don't have a precise definition in my head, but material science seems to be like the closest thing that is interesting to what I want to do. I'm sorry.
No, though, but it sounds like that is more experimentation oriented. And that fits with your childhood curiosity of how does this work, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I very much found myself in my degree of liking the experimental and laboratory side of physics more than necessarily the classroom. Like the classroom was interesting, but the lab classes were like, okay, so what do all of these equations mean in the real world? And like this model is great, but how do we apply it to things? And that's sort of how I wound up as an engineer instead of working just in physics because I like looking at how the model applies to the real world.
That's pretty interesting, Jack. You know, a lot of kids don't know where they go beyond an idea, and you sort of took an idea and then figured out how to make it applicable to the real world. So, Jack, in these closing minutes, what would you say to a student who loves math, sees themselves in the things that you have described? Where would you tell them is the best investment of their time in high school before they get to college?
Really like get your basic math skills down. Just keep trying, don't give up, stay curious, really. Like if you're curious about something, learn about it. You know, teachers always tell you Wikipedia is not a good source. It's not a good final source, but it's a good first source. If you're curious about something, read its Wikipedia page. Keep learning. Never give up on learning. I think that's the best way that you can get to where I am.
I like the fact that you said never give up on learning because, you know, our whole goal here as a company is to build lifelong learners, but that looks different for everyone. Tell me what the best things have been being a young adult, having it your own career path. Tell me, what would be encouraging words that you would say to a student who's just slogging their way through college going, I don't know if I want to do this. Adulting seems really hard.
I mean, I guess I told them, yeah, it is hard, but you've got as far as you have, giving up would be a waste of all the time and effort that you've already put into it, right? And cool things can come out of college, even if it's just learning for the sake of learning. And one of the things I've learned with being an adult is no one has any idea what they're doing. Everyone is just faking it. So just keep faking it. I've gotten as far in my life with no idea what's going on and just pretending like I have a clue. And if you're with a good team of people, when you're faking it isn't working out, they'll be like, hey, what if we try faking it that way? And then you go, oh, okay, readjusting, going that way.
Jack, I want to say thank you for the time that you've spent with me today. This was really tremendous. I love the way you think. And it always is fascinating to me the things that you say because I'm always amazed at the depth of wisdom that you can produce. So I just want to say thank you for the time today. This was pretty extraordinary. And I wish you luck and success in your journeys. And I hope that perhaps you'll come back someday and let us know how that 5-year pursuit turns out.
Thanks again for joining us. We're glad to be a part of your educational community. You can help us grow our community even more by rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the show wherever you may be hearing this. Don't forget that you can access the show notes and watch a recording at demilearning.com/show or on our YouTube channel. We'll see you again next time. Until then, keep building strong foundations for lifelong learning.